So I've had a lot of jobs. And a lot of stories come from said jobs. Pretty interesting to other people, not necessarily interesting to me, but I think that's just because they happened to me, so I'm not really interested in these stories. So I figured I would go ahead and go over a little synopsis of each job and whether or not I liked working there or I would like to work again, just for fun. I'll go ahead and number each job 1 through I don't know how many jobs I've had, so that you guys can follow along with each job and tell me if you'd like to hear more about said job or said horror story if I have one about said job. So let's start off when I was 17. My first job was a summer between my sophomore and junior year. Job was at this place called Soto's Burgers and Ice Cream. It was owned by people who owned a bunch of different stores, like up in Tampa, in Miami. They talked about those other locations all the time. I worked there for 4 days and then they shut down. On a scale of 1 to 10, would I work there again? 0, because they're closed. So it's not an option. So that was my first job. My second job, I turned 18, and the day that I turned 18, I walked briskly 7 miles and applied to every job that I could just to get a job that was 0.5 of a mile away from my house. It was the bowling alley itself was headpins. I met my ex-fiance there. He was not my ex at the time, and I worked with my mom. I worked there for a little over a year. I do have a couple funny stories, not necessarily horror, from that job. 0 out of 10, I'd put it at a solid 3. But I worked at Walmart while I was working at Nemo's. I worked there for 3 months. I got injured there, and I ended up quitting because of a hospital visit. My next job was Perkins, I think. I worked there for 6 months. I really liked it there. 1 out of 10, 10 would be the best. Perkins was my favorite job to work at, honestly. I don't have any horror stories, again, from this job, but I do have some funny stories. The next job, which I had at the same time as Perkins, is I worked at a local bowling alley that I'll keep the name private because I still have family that works there. It would be kind of like inconsiderate of me to talk about because I hated it. Absolutely hated it. I think I worked there for 3 or 4 weeks, and the way I quit was honestly hilarious. I will get into that again if you wish. Just let me know if you want to hear any of these stories about any of these jobs. The next job I had at the same time as the bowling alley and Perkins. That job was Taco Bell. I worked there for I think a month and quit because I guess I'm just going to go into this one. I had to come in on my day off to cover for somebody else's shift and ended up not making money, but spending money, $20 to be exact, because the drawer that I was working off that day was apparently short, and I quit because of it, because it wasn't my fault. I didn't steal $20. Why the do I have to pay you $20? Anyway, I will tell you that story again if you want to hear it. So after Taco Bell and the bowling alley and Perkins, the next job I had was McDonald's, because while I was employed at Perkins still, after I had dropped the other 2 jobs, I ended up getting in my massive car accident and I could only work with 1 arm. I literally could not use my left arm for anything. So as I was doing my job at Perkins, even though I was doing it within an appropriate amount of time to finish my position, and even though I did finish all of my work, I did it all one-handed, and because I was the baker, they said I was a liability, so I had to leave. So I left, and I ended up working at McDonald's. They didn't care that I was in a sling most of the time. They didn't care that I was only working with 1 arm. They were just like, yeah, we need people. I'm like, cool. I worked there overnight for 5 months, and I ended up quitting that job by setting my alarm for my overnight shift, going to sleep, and then when my alarm went off, I looked at it, I turned it off, and I went back to sleep. I also conveniently ended up in the hospital that week, so I told them that that was why I wasn't in, because I was in the hospital, but they also didn't care. That job I would not work at. It'd be a 1 out of 10. I would work at it again. I didn't like the people. I do have a couple funny stories, slight horror stories, if you want to hear those. At the same time as working at McDonald's, I also worked for an absolutely amazing Italian restaurant. Homegrown, they've been there since 1979. I would absolutely recommend going to Mona Lisa Italian Restaurant if you can. Just support local businesses. Absolutely love it. I worked there for 1.5 years. I was their delivery driver. I actually applied to be a server, and they called me and were like, hey, delivery driver? Right, literally 2 weeks after my big car accident. So that was a little uncomfortable, but I did the job and I flourished. Absolutely loved the job. 10 out of 10 would work there again, but I don't think they'd hire me again because of the way I quit. Medication and my brain don't mix well together, and medication kind of makes me angry a lot, and I do stupid things when I'm angry, and I got angry at one of the servers, so I quit my job because I couldn't stand his stupidity anymore, and I regretted it almost instantly. I loved that job. 10 out of 10 would recommend working there or just dining there. Absolutely 10 out of 10. Mona Lisa Italian Restaurant, 10 out of 10. I'm gonna keep saying 10 out of 10 because I absolutely love Mona's. Mona's has been around in my life my entire life. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Working or eating there, would recommend. 10 out of 10. So that was my favorite job by far. My next job was during Mona's because I just was broke all the time, needed more money. I was working at Dunkin' Donuts, and I ended up quitting because one of the shift managers was physically being threatening towards me and yelling at me, and I just was not going to take the hostility. I was like, nah. So I took off my headset, I clocked out, and I walked to my car and I sat in my car. She came out and apologized, asked me to come back in, so I came back in, and I was told to leave and that I quit. I'm like, I didn't quit. You told me to leave. What? There are more interesting stories, not horror stories, with that location. So I ended up getting fired from there, quitting. I don't know if I quit or I got fired. I guess we'll never know. The next job, again, I was still working at Mona's during this next job. I worked at an Italian restaurant that just recently closed permanently, unfortunately. They were open for a little over 1 year. Leopardi's Italian restaurant, I don't know if I would work there again. I think I'm going to put that one in a 5 because it's I don't know. But then I'm going to knock it back down to 0 because they're closed. So no, it wouldn't even be an option. I did really like the job when I first started there, and I ended up hating the job for the 2 weeks leading up to me quitting because I had been asking for more hours than 16 hours a week for 3 months in a row, and I was just getting fed up with getting short end of the stick, no hours. I wasn't making a lot of money. I was doing way too much for the amount of money I was making. And I just really wasn't into it. I had been there since before we opened, and I just ended up not liking it. And then the last week I was supposed to be there, I was scheduled 8 hours, and I was offended because I was literally 3 days prior to the schedule coming out. I was the one person who was recognized for doing her job. So due to the 8-hour shift I was supposed to work that one day that week, I said, you can suck it because that's not for me. While I was working at that job as well, I had quit Mona's, so I was solely working at Leopardi's, and then I picked up a different Dunkin'. I had to go through a separate district manager. I had to make sure that everything was separated. Not the same district manager, not the same store manager. Nothing was the same, and the reason why is because of what happened in the first Dunkin'. And the reason why I didn't rate the first Dunkin' as to whether or not I would work again at Dunkin' is because I did work again at Dunkin'. I was there for 3 months, I think. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it at that location. I would surely put it at a 3 out of 10. Would not recommend working there. I was just there for the money. And then I ended up moving, but I moved with my Dunkin' position. Like, I moved states with my position, even though it was a different company that I moved with. So I moved, I went to Dunkin' in the state that I'm currently in. I was there for 9 months. I ended up being a manager for 6 of the 9 months. Got a lot of horror stories about both the Dunkin' in Florida and the Dunkin' up here, because I was at like 6 different locations. A lot of horror stories, man. A lot of funny horror stories. 0 out of 10 would recommend. Would not recommend at all. Would not recommend. Do not work for this company at all. Terrible company. I'll get into that later, regardless of whether or not you guys want to hear that one. But while I was working at Dunkin' before I was a manager, I ended up working at Jack in the Box. Absolutely hated it. I was there for 4 days. I was physically threatened by customers on more than one occasion, and I quit. And 0 out of 10 would not recommend working there either, because honestly, that was bad. Don't work there. So Jack in the Box, terrible. Dunkin', terrible. After I stopped working at Dunkin', I got a job offer at Starbucks, and then the day that I was supposed to get a call back saying that the training was going to start this day and this time, and this is going to be your trainer and everything, that was also conveniently the same day that all Starbucks is closed. All of them for like 2 weeks. And I was stressed because I didn't have any money at that point, and Starbucks was closed, so I can't get a job there. So I applied at Walmart, and I called the location that was closest to my house. And I said, hey, I applied a couple weeks ago. I totally lied. They said, yeah, we can't hire you. You didn't pass the tests. I'm like, shoot. 2 weeks later, I get a call back from Walmart. So I called them back, stood on hold for 15 minutes to get to personnel. And I was like, hey, I just got a call. This was a different location though. I just got a call. I think you guys are trying to hire me. And they pulled up my information. Took them another 15 minutes. I'm not kidding. To pull up my information, and they immediately offered me a job on the spot. And I'm like, okay, might as well. So I started working there. 3 weeks later, I called Starbucks back when they were open. I was like, hey, I just resubmitted my application because it expired and everything. Can you tell the store manager that I reapplied? So she takes a couple days to call me back. And she called me back and she goes, so here's the deal. And I thought that meant she couldn't hire me because I worked at Dunkin', because Starbucks has said that to me before when I was in Florida and I had just previously gotten fired from Dunkin', right? So I was thinking this lady was going to tell me, you can't be hired here because of Dunkin'. But it didn't make sense to me because she also was extremely happy with the fact that I was a manager at Dunkin' and was like, dude, we could move you up soon. I was like, okay. So here's the deal. I can't hire you. I was like, there it is. And she goes, because nobody can hire anybody right now. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, COVID. I'm like, oh no. So she said, but here's the loophole. I'm like, oh, you found me a loophole? You care that much? Because there was a new location opening up. So she forwarded my application to the new location, said to the new location's manager, hey, this person has been a manager at Dunkin' for them for 3 years. Literally hire her now. So she did, and absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. There are a few questionable things about working at Starbucks, but it's like questionable as in, are you guys duping me? Like, where's the joke? They have such great benefits for their employees. I freaking love it. And that is my history of my jobs. Let me know if you would like to hear any of my funny / horror stories from any job. I will be glad to share any of them. I'm totally numbering all of these so that you know which number to tell me. You don't have to necessarily tell me what job I was at, especially because I worked at Walmart twice and I worked at Dunkin' 3 times, so it'd be confusing, you know? So just tell me what number you'd like to hear and I'll totally tell you the stories. I'm definitely telling you some of the stories anyway, regardless of whether or not you want to hear them, because I want to tell them. Alrighty, I don't know how to end a video, so have a great day. I hope you guys have a great day. Honestly, I don't know.